I called the regular city council meeting for the city of Dunsmuir to order at approximately 6:02 p.m. May we all rise for the flag salute.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And Wendy, may we move into roll call, please?
Yes, Councilmember Keisler
Here.
and Councilmember Deutsch
Here.
and Councilmember Bryant
Present.
and Councilmember Clerno
Here.
and Mayor Lucchese.
Present, thank you. And so we do not have any special presentations or announcements tonight. So we'll move into item number 4, which is general public comment. This is the time in our meeting for items that are not on the agenda or items that are on our consent agenda, which is the check register for October 14th through October 27th through 2023. So you may approach the podium, please state your name, and you will have 3 minutes to address the council on a consent agenda item or an item not on the agenda. Yes.
All right, Allison Leshevsky, 5334 River Avenue. I'm going to read some meeting notes of my public comments from before. August 3rd, 2023, Allison Leshevsky. She appreciates the town historian. That's when Ron McLeod was here. I really liked that presentation. And appreciates the power of collective action. She supports the downtown rejuvenation and vacant and distressed ordinance and wants to know what's up with the piece of plywood that's been on the face of City Hall for the last 2 months. September 7th, 2023, Allison Leshevsky supports the abandoned and distressed ordinance, wants to ask again, why do we still have a piece of plywood on the City Hall door? We haven't even covered it with a coat of paint, I had said. November 2nd, today, 2023, I support the abandoned and distressed ordinance, and I find it hypocritical if we continue to have a piece of plywood on the City Hall. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Are there any other general public comments on items not on the agenda or items on the consent agenda? And those who are on Zoom may raise their hand using the reactions tab, and you'll also have 3 minutes. All right, seeing none, we'll close public comment, move into council and staff member comments. We'll move right away into City Manager Reef.
All right, I have, so I got an update from Fire Safe Council for the Green Waste Collection Day. There were 90 community members who participated, 42 unique vehicles, loads of green waste. There were 60 loads, 10 passenger cars, 41 pickup trucks, and 9 trailer loads with approximately 60 cubic yards of waste. Yeah. More data by street. Let's see. Ironically, one of the shortest streets, Mountain Avenue, had 7 loads, whereas Dunsmuir Avenue only had 7. It's the longest street. So that's all I have on green waste. The library roof, nobody's here to celebrate, but we are actually under contract.
Hey.
They tell us within 60 days, our deposit is paid, and so within 60 days, we will have a new roof on that.
Thank you.
No problem. We have been working on the plans for public workshop. Hope to have those come forward hopefully next meeting. But we're getting close on that. Noticed all the trees have been taken down. I think we've finished the trees, correct? Yeah, earlier this week we finished the trees. I think there was going to be 23. And the residents or whoever, we put the wood out on the street and it disappeared overnight, and we were happy and the residents are happy. So
I did have a couple of residents talk to me directly saying that they were very appreciative of
there was a lot of good,
not securing the pile of wood.
there was a lot of good oak and a lot of good cedar.
Question, I talked to Dennis about Cal Fire. Are they still around doing things in town?
No, they had been Burns, but they were here.
Okay.
So Cal Fire did do, so there's 2 different groups. There's the Deadwood crew, and then there's the actual Cal Fire guys. And so the Cal Fire The actual guides, they don't cost us any money. They came up for how many days? 7 days total between the two crews. And so they helped cut a lot of the logs. They cleaned up. We got all of Shasta Avenue, a bunch of stuff in the park. They kept everything from Greenway stays. And they're trying to think where else were they? Did they make it to the plan? Yeah, they did a bunch of work down at the treatment plant for us. So that has been happening over the last couple of weeks. And so that's going well. Kind of getting closed up for winter. I know we're what are we, 170 days over on the water tank, and we have been discussions. There's some issues with the paint on the interior that is not up to par. And so they're going to have to go back in and sandblast an area we're still in negotiations with. It's been kind of a back and forth since July, and we're finally feel like we're at a point where we're agreeing on what's going to be done, and so that's they will be continuing that effort. But yeah, that tank project is supposed to be completed last December.
Last year.
Yeah, and we are now still don't have water in it. And I know Bruce made it up there.
In the old thing.
Not yet. We don't have full confirmation on that yet. That's good news, but we will hold off until we have full confirmation.
We can neither confirm or deny the existence of any special sensitive species.
So the tank project has a lot to do on the Springs project. So before the last council meeting, Councilmember Bryan and Councilmember Deutsch took a ride with Dennis and myself out to the Springs to look at that. And the rest of you are welcome. If you find time before the winter comes in, let me know. We could try and get you up there, or either myself or Dennis or both of us, depending on our timing, could make it up there and with you for the tour. But we'll be bringing forward the Springs project as starts. When's that bid start? We can have that soon. Should be out to bid this month for spring construction. So the Springs project relies on the tank project being complete. And so we have some push-pull here. That's why they were done in a certain sequence. And so but anyway, the Springs project is about a $2 million project to upgrade and our spring capture components. Some of that hasn't been touched since the 40s, 1940s, not 2040s. And so we're over 80 years into that. And it's time for us to do some upgrades for improvements. So that's coming. Brandstetter, Hope, and Apple Street project that is out for bid currently. We open those bids on the 14th, and that should be back to the council for approval on December 7th for new pavement. And so our
motorcycle. I hate
yeah,
Brandstetter.
I know our expectation is that we will not be able to afford all three components of that. And so we are focusing on Brandstetter, and then Hope and Apple are bonuses if we get them. But based on what we've had for bids lately on asphalt, we're not going to come close. We'll run out of money. And so we bid it purposely that way. Let's see. My update turned into a much longer update than I expected. We're also working on a sewer lateral project. And so that project is coming going out to bid mid-December. We'll open those bids in January. That will replace, I don't even know how many linear feet of pipe, but it's essentially a $7 million project to help with our INI. Couple of other things to note. Chamber mixer is on the 15th. That pops from 5 to 7 p.m. calendar.
You said 5 to 7?
5 to 7 on the 15th. That pops.
Okay.
And I believe it's catered by Madalena. Finance committee, Monday the 13th, if that works for you. And then Red Yard tour is tomorrow at 3 p.m.
We may have the assembly members, staff and senators.
We may have a few more people than that.
I'm sorry,
We
I
have-
invited people that I should
that's-
have asked permission before, but.
No, that's
it came up
perfectly
in
okay.
conversation.
The water board's probably gonna be
You
there.
said the 13th for finance.
13th for finance. So rail yard tour, 3 PM tomorrow. I believe we're meeting at their shed down there. Downtown revitalization is on Tuesday at 6 PM here in the council chambers, and that'll be a community engagement component
This next Tuesday.
this coming.
What are we doing to push that out for people to attend?
It's went through the chamber and we've reached out directly to a few businesses and stuff. So
Okay,
it's posted on Facebook, I believe, too.
thank you.
And
You said that was at what time?
6.
6 PM.
So Tuesday at 6 for the.
Yeah, so
revitalization.
we'll go,
Awesome.
we'll go in calendar order. Yeah, so calendar order tomorrow, 3 PM. Tuesday at 6 PM. And then
Chamber mixer the 15th.
chamber mixer is the 15th.
And then the
5 p.m.
16th is what's on your plate,
Yeah,
just to add that to the calendar.
Oh, yeah, the 16th. That's the council meeting. so-
Yeah, and as we did last year, I expect that you, myself, and he could show up and say a few words.
Oh, for the Thanksgiving thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so we show up at 5:30, then we can be here by 6, and so make our gloves.
It's 6 o'clock. For downtown revitalization.
Yeah, on the 7th. And I think there's something else. I just can't remember
You can send us an email.
what it is. It's that time of year where there's a lot of
Thanks.
evening
Mhm.
events going on. So
All right, anything else? Any other questions?
I don't think so. I mean, other than we met with the sheriff, but I was gonna leave that to you.
I kind of got a question, I don't know if this is appropriate time, but have you been asked about a new flag?
I did.
For the cemetery for the,
Yes, I
Yeah.
responded to Peter this morning about it and we're working on it. We're double checking. But we'll get you, we will have a flag.
we will have a flag.
Yes,
Okay, cool. Thank you.
if I have to drive all the way.
Elks Lodge and Mount Shasta can help you with that.
Okay.
All right,
See if.
going through the council members, Councilmember Keisler, do you have any updates or comments for today?
I got a girlfriend. I'm happy. I'm fine.
Okay.
I'm good.
Okay, Councilmember Deutsch.
Nope, I'm fine.
All right, Councilmember Clarno,
I'm good.
Councilmember Brian.
Also happy to move the meeting on.
Okay, the only updates I have is we have our Veterans Day ceremony on the 11th, which is Saturday. There's a flyer coming out, or there should be a flyer around town. I think they're putting posts on Facebook, so there's a number of events that the Eagles and Rotary and a number of other private citizens are putting on. We hope everybody can attend at least some of those. I think it is November 11th, a Saturday. Yeah, it sits on a Saturday this year. So if you're able to come by, that would be great. I think I'll be doing the morning and then I'll be at the cemetery saying something nice before we go into all of those things. So please attend those. And then, yeah, just a reminder for the railroad. And we'll move into committee reports.
I have a question for you
I
first.
forgot one also.
The city or the ceremony at the cemetery
Correct.
is at 11 a.m.
It is 11:15.
11:15.
Yes, so we will be
11, right?
11, yeah, so we will be at the cemetery 11:15. I believe there is going to be a toast at the Eagles prior to walking up to the cemetery.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's why it's at 11:15, so it gives everybody enough time to walk up or drive up to the cemetery in time for the ceremony starting at 11:15.
I've been asked to
Okay.
judge the essays from the elementary schools. So that'll be
Yes.
interesting.
So have I.
Yes,
City Hall is closed on the 10th
yes,
in observation of the holiday.
yes. Friday, yep. Okay, all right. Thank you, everybody, for that one. And we'll move into committee reports. I know we have a sheriff's ad hoc committee report. Are there any other committee reports?
9.
Do you want to give it or you want me to roll?
You can go.
So Matthew, Dustin and I met with Sheriff LaRue to discuss our extension for the sheriff's contract that we don't currently have. And so we got to finally sit down and talk about needed updates and different ideas for that and funding mechanisms. A lot of it was around what kind of services we would like to see, what's going well, what isn't. And so we've set another date in November to re-meet with everyone, December. Thank you. We set another meeting in December to meet back up, and Sheriff LaRue will hopefully have a extension for us, a draft extension for the ad hoc committee to review at that time. There's a new auditor and there's a lot going on. They have new county council, and so it's taken them a long time to put together the new extension. We're also talking to them about that extension allowing us to do another multi-year contract with the sheriff's office. So we're kind of doing those two things, and we'll be reporting back to the council as we get closer to that draft being done.
Question, so I mean, we're kind of in that situation where all the different police forces are complaining they're not getting paid as much. How do you sense that they're looking at that? Are they trying to balance that out with our ability to pay?
Yes, and so that was kind of a primary start to the conversation. So right now we're paying about $58 an hour, which is significantly less than what is the actual cost for dispatching services, police officers, unfunded liabilities and mandates. And so we will probably see an increase in the cost for services, which we kind of all knew a little bit going into it. But Sheriff LaRue assured us that we're going to do the best that we can to make it absorbable by the city. There's a big disparity, and they have us, Doris, and Tule Lake, Montague. Thank you, Montague, and we are by far out of those three paying more than the other two. And so they do know that Dunsmuir has been contributing quite a bit. And so we're looking at creative ways to continue to fund it, but also be creative and not necessarily cost us too much money to go forward. I think the 1-year extension was really kind of a discussion on just maintaining what we currently have, just because again, we don't have enough time and we are currently out of contract. So I think the 1-year extension will be a similar deal. I don't think there will really be any increase, but we'll see. Again, I think it's more of what's coming out of the auditor's office and county council as opposed to the sheriff's office for that.
Yeah, but he was very engaged with us at hearing what the city needs, forming a contract that works with that, and then strategizing on how that can be achieved at the county. He understands, he's here to serve. So I thought, at least as far as the message went, I appreciated it. We'll see when it comes down to dollars and cents, what we're able to achieve. But the general focus was to make our sheriff's contract function more like a police department in Dunsmuir for Dunsmuir, with people that are connected to the community in one capacity or another.
Now, I have a question here for the two of you. When you say we're paying more, are we paying more total or are we paying more per hour?
We don't know yet. So it was just.
No, I'm sorry, when you say more than the other communities.
Oh,
I know we're paying
yeah.
more total than there, but are we
Yes.
also paying more per hour
Yes,
of service? Yes.
No,
a little bit. Yes.
no.
Okay.
Everyone else is also on extensions, from what I understand. So they would also reflect the auditor's numbers last time they renewed.
Well, yes, but that's still is the question of whether or not we as a city are paying more per hour for their service than Doris or Montague.
I believe my understanding of the conversation is that we do pay a little bit more, but again, it's still significantly less than the actual cost of service.
We pay 4 more hours.
Yes, so the total
Not-
cost is more, but
not per hour.
the cost
Okay.
per hour
I
of
don't
our
know their
contract is the
contracts at
same.
that level, but it would come down to the way it used to be done back when this one was renewed, is the auditor gave you a number and you went with the sheriff's department or sought another source. So
But we'll get that
Sure,
all,
that's-
we'll get that all to you for the extension. And if you would like Doris and Montague's contracts, we can get that as well to look at the per rate. But yeah, it was a great conversation. We will have more with him as we go forward. And that's all we have for committee reports. Do you have any questions? All right, rolling into approval of the minutes for October 19, 2023, regular meeting. Is there any discussion or a motion?
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
There's been a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
So motion by Councilmember Keisler, second by Councilmember Clarno to approve the minutes as submitted. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstention, motion carries. Thank you. We'll move into consent agenda. We have one item 8A, the check register for October 14th through October 27th, 2023. Is there any discussion or a motion?
I'll make a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion by Councilmember Keisler, second by Councilmember Bryan to adopt the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. Thank you. And that will move us into item number 9, which is our public hearing for the evening, which is our 2023-2031 housing element update. And I will hand it off to our contract planner, Rico Tinsman, and Michelle and Vanessa from Plan West. Or maybe just Michelle.
Yeah, good evening, Council of Dunsmuir. Thank you for having me. I think Vanessa stepped off for the moment to attend another meeting, and Enrico may have done the same. Sorry that I'm a little bit congested. I'm at the tail end of COVID. So, but I'm very happy to be here, and I wanted to express my appreciation to be able to make the presentation and give input and give this information to the council virtually. I appreciate that. So I should be able to share my screen, and I assume you guys can all hear me okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. So let me go ahead and share my screen and get started and get the right screen. Okay. So let's see, you should be. So you should be seeing a slide deck. Is that what you guys are seeing in
Yeah.
Dunsmuir? Great.
Yeah, it's just not in presenter mode.
Okay. Oh, it should be. Let's see here. Oh, does it want the whole thing? Okay. Oh, wait. Okay. Let me stop. Sorry, guys. Okay, slideshow. And let me see if I can get this to work and go from beginning and Zoom. Oh my gosh.
You're okay. I had COVID too, and I didn't know what time was. It's okay.
Okay. Is it in presenter mode now?
Perfect.
Yay! Happy day. Okay. So let's get started. I'm here tonight. My name is Michelle Nielsen. I am a senior planner with the Plan West Partners, and Vanessa Blodgett, who stepped off for a bit. She is the principal planner. And of course, we have Wendy Perkins, the deputy city clerk, who's been instrumental in helping coordinate everything and get things on the city's website and all that. And of course, Rico, the city's contract planner, with facilitating that, giving input and whatnot. So just want to recognize these folks. And on our end, we've actually had some other folks that were also part of the effort to prepare the city's housing element that's before you this evening. So there is a lot to the document. There's a lot to digest. And although it's catered to the city's specific conditions and needs, there are substantial portions that are required by state law. And the content is intended, probably upwards of 80% of the content is intended to address these specific state requirements. You see that in like the appendices, Appendix A, which contains a lot of demographic and socioeconomic data, and also the programs, which we'll go over in a little more detail later on. But so that's something to keep in mind is there's a lot of mandatory content, which is part of the reason the document is the size that it is, because there'll be the reviewing agency will be looking for that. So ultimately, what staff is asking is for the city council to be adopted and authorized submittal to the California Department of Housing and Community Development. Because unlike other elements of a general plan, the housing element is not only a mandatory element, but it is also subject to the review and certification of the Department of Housing and Community Development. That's HCD, which I'll probably say numerous times this evening. So, and the reason we're asking for city council adoption this evening is due to an upcoming deadline for the grant that is providing the financial support for the update of the housing element. After HCD's 90-day review has concluded, the element, we anticipate there will be comments from HCD because that has been our experience. They always are looking for some revisions and modifications to housing element. So after we receive those written comments, then we would revise the housing element to address those comments. And it is possible those comments won't be substantial and they'll be more minor in nature, but they could be looking for more information. At the same time, we also want to acknowledge that the zoning ordinance that the city adopted earlier this year, I think it was June or July, put the city in a really good place for this housing element update, that it goes a long ways for providing opportunities for more residential development. So this slide just kind of gives a real high level agenda, probably a little bit out of order of my talking points, but we'll go ahead and move on. So what is a housing element? Like I said, a housing element is a mandatory element of the general plan. So not only does it have this mandatory review by the state of California, it is required to be updated much more frequently than other elements of the general plan. It's updated on 8-year cycles. And so this update is for the current cycle, which is referred to also as the 6th cycle, which is the period of 2023 and 2031. And a certified housing element, which is what you get when the Department of Housing and Community Development, HCD, says, oh, it meets all of the, it substantially meets all the requirements of state law, then that basically you're able to access certain state funding programs. So it's pretty important, or very important, I should say. Let me just kind of scroll down here in my notes. So what a housing element does is it provides an assessment of both current and future housing needs for all income groups. It identifies opportunities in the community, but also constraints on housing production. And those could be regulatory constraints, which fortunately Dunsmuir removed many of those with the zoning regulations, but also you need to the housing element needs to look at non-regulatory constraints, things that the city's not going to have control over. Establishes goals, policies, and programs to meet the housing needs for the community. There is an emphasis, and you probably reading through it, for lower income households, because that's what the state is also looking for for compliance with state law. And then also housing element serves to update the city's policies, programs, and regulations and procedures to reflect new state law. So a lot of that actually has been accomplished. So the housing element is broken into 3 chapters and 5 appendices. Excuse me, sorry. An introduction, and also in the introduction, you will find a summary of the community survey that was done for the 5 cities, but there's a breakdown for Dunsmuir specifically in the introduction. Goals, policies, and programs, which is just that, what the city's goals, policies, and implementation programs for the next 8 years, and analysis of previous housing element programs. So that would be reporting how the city did in the previous cycle, and why maybe some programs weren't able to be accomplished, which that's the case for many jurisdictions. They don't have the resources to do that. So, and some programs from the previous housing element, I can't think of one specifically off the top of my head verbatim, but some programs were carried forward from that previous housing element. Maybe the language was tweaked, and some were that weren't relevant now, weren't we're not recommending those be carried forward. Oops. And so then there's also the 5 appendices. Appendix A is probably the longest section. It's an assessment of housing needs for the community and fair housing. The fair housing component is a new requirement of state law, housing constraints and needs, inventory of sites, a review of funding resources. Those would be government types of funding for construction of new housing or rehab of housing, or programs that for direct assistance that maybe a housing authority would access. And then Appendix E, a glossary of all the technical terms, as there's numerous ones of those. So let's see, and big old page break in my notes. So some of the key takeaways on the socioeconomic data. So just before we kind of go over these real quick, a lot of the patterns that that the data indicate are being experienced in the other communities and in the region as a whole. I mean, Dunsmuir would have its own unique flavor of it, but generally a lot of this is the similar patterns and trends. And probably a lot of this information is residents and city leaders are aware of, the conditions of households, through, just their day-to-day work. And so there's probably not too much new light being shed here, but it's still important and does provide kind of a update of where things are at, and helps inform, what the housing needs of a community in the community may be. So generally, the Dunsuir's population, as measured by both the number of individuals and households, has generally been declining since 2000. The number of families, which are defined by the U.S. Census as a householder living in a home with one or more individuals who are related by birth, marriage, or adoption, has actually remained fairly steady. The number of non-family households, there's generally been a decline. So those population changes are, many communities in Siskiyou County are experiencing that. Excuse me. Let's see here. Just kind of continuing with the population from 2010 to 2020, there was a notable increase in the number of individuals who are under 5 years of age. It went from 100 individuals, that was the count according to U.S. Census, to 290 individuals. Also, during the same period, there was an increase in younger adults, so the 25 to 34 year range. The number of individuals who are 65 and older has also increased during that same period, but the individuals who are 35 to 64 decreased. And that's, I'm noting that because typically that age group can be a large part of the workforce, whether within the community or within the region. These are trends that are similar to what's being seen in the county as a whole. And also, like the region, Dunsmuir is more racially and ethnically diverse than it was in 2010. With respect to household income, the median gross household income shifted generally towards higher income brackets since 2010. But the increase in terms of dollars was fairly small. So whether household incomes are keeping up with inflation, they may not be. Excuse me. I'm sorry, everybody. And the household income in Dunsmuir for Dunsmuir households was generally lower than for the region, which is Siskiyou County as a whole, by about $7,600. In terms of poverty, The percentage of Dunsmuir children who are below the poverty line is much lower than the county's rate. Dunsmuir is at 13% in comparison to the regions, which is almost 22%. The Dunsmuir's poverty rate for adults and seniors is relatively comparable to Siskiyou County's. Although the adults, which are 18 to 64, was a bit higher than the counties. Costs. So taking those lenses and looking at cost burden, like how much are people paying of their gross household income towards housing, both renter and owner households in Dunsmuir are experiencing cost burden, which means they're paying 30% or more of their income towards housing. In Dunsmuir, it's about 46% of households are experiencing that. So not sure if they're sorry.
Okay.
Let's see here. So in terms of large family households, which the US Census defines, and I guess this could have some cultural context because they define it as a large family as 5 or more persons, and there has been a generally increase in the number of large family renter households since 2010. And kind of occurring along the same time as there's been an upward trend of overcrowding in renter households, which is defined as 1.01 persons or more per room. At times, the percentage of overcrowding is measured by the American Community Survey, which is published by the US Census, is higher than the rate experienced in the counties, but sometimes it's lower, those estimates. The reason this is being mentioned is that it could large families can have a harder time finding housing that meets their needs because they may need more bedrooms. So they may, have more, may not be able to find the housing units that meet they're more difficult to find in communities oftentimes. So that's why it's being mentioned, and it's something that the HCD is definitely looking for. Housing conditions. So just based on age alone, this is not a housing condition survey, but based on the number of the percentage of Dunsmuir's existing housing stock, about 80% of it was built before 1970, which is near like 50 years ago. I was born in 1971, so I'm like, no, it wasn't that long ago. But anyways, so about 80% was built before 1970, and 42% of the total stock was built prior to 1940. So just looking at by age alone, there could be many units in the city that may require rehab, of course, depending on the level of maintenance that those units have received over the years. But of course, maintaining a home, whether it's a rental property or a unit you own and occupies the owner, is very costly. And it's, as I'm sure many know, it's just been getting more and more expensive, just in terms of materials, and then if you retain a contractor to do that work. The housing stock is mostly in Dunsmuir, is mostly detached single-family residences, which is very common in Siskiyou County. But that does also present an opportunity for property owners to potentially add accessory dwelling units or convert some living space into a junior accessory dwelling unit. And finally, my last point here is the vacancy rate. The vacancy rate for Dunsmuir has declined. It was higher, but it still remains high at 27%, which is actually higher than the region. I think it's actually the highest in Siskiyou County. And at the same time, the production of new units has been low, another condition that's being experienced in other communities. So in terms of so that was mostly Appendix A, but also a bit on Appendix B, kind of trying to give some detail. In terms of housing sites, the housing element has to show that a jurisdiction, a locality has, there's several categories. One is basically just generally there's a adequate land that has appropriate zoning for residential uses to allow a variety of housing types, whether it be, detached single family residence, doing duplexes, multifamily, cottage, missing middle type housing, is one category. Then there's that there's adequate air capacity for the estimated emergency shelter need. And then the final category and very important one is does the city have an adequate supply of land to meet its regional housing needs allocation, the RENA, and which is 2 units for Dunsmuir. So it's much lower number than has been in the past. And Dunsmuir has adequate sites to meet all of those categories that HCD will evaluate the housing element. They'll be looking for that. Sorry. So there's no need to upzone any land. There's no need to change any zoning to, accommodate the RENA. There was, we were able to, based on the city's existing zoning and the criteria for housing element inventory, we were able to identify adequate sites for all these categories. And just because a piece of property is listed, especially if it's privately owned, is listed in the housing element inventory, it doesn't compel a property owner that they have to build that type of housing on that site. Because they have that choice to make, whether they want to add an ADU or do a duplex or do multifamily. Sorry. So that's doesn't listing in the inventory in this Appendix 3C, excuse me, doesn't create that type of obligation for private property owners. just a second, I need to drink some water. So just to keep things moving on, I think I kind of gave an overview of Appendix D, the funding resources, government funding that's available, and Appendix E, the glossary that has the technical jargon. So recommended housing element programs. We did try to make that chapter 2 of the document a little easier for readers to navigate by including these 2 icons to help quickly identify programs in the element. Sorry. I need to take a break.
You need a minute, Michelle?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So just really quick going through it. So the goals, policies and programs that are within chapter 2 of the housing element are outlined with the 2 different icons, as Michelle was saying. The ones with the state of California next to them are related to state mandates or new housing laws that have come into effect in the past, couple of years. We get a number of bills each year that we have to deal with in planning, and a lot of them have to do with meeting equity goals, meeting zoning goals, ADUs, accessory dwelling units. And then the house with the equal sign in it is a symbol to identify goals, policies, and programs that are meaningful actions towards what we call AFFH, which is affirmatively furthering fair housing, which is related to a federal initiative as well as a state initiative to identify goals, policies, and programs that will reduce segregation within the city. And so when we have segregation in the city, we're not necessarily talking about like 1950s, 1960s, as we've typically seen in history, but it's also looking at where there are people experiencing less economic advantages. It's people who are, as we stated before, having overcrowding or issues like that. So it's not just looking at that piece, but it's also looking at the spread of housing and the type of people within our community and seeing if there are people being, you know, put in one neighborhood over another and congregating because, you know, there aren't as many resources, or that there are people who have higher incomes, more opportunity towards economic success living in another area. And so what those programs try to do is it tries to spread out the wealth, if you will, or spread out the programs so that you have these disadvantaged communities or disadvantaged pockets of our community getting more resources to be able to kind of equal everyone out. So again, it's making sure that all of the new, you know, programming isn't going to those higher income neighborhoods. It's being spread across some of these other areas to give opportunities. So I'm, you know, honestly, Michelle, if you want me to talk for a little bit, I can roll through the state laws if you just want to click through the slides.
Yeah, let's maybe do that.
Okay, so
moment.
some of the housing, some of the goals, policies, and programs that are being recommended within the housing element related to state law are related to the development of workforce housing and housing affordable to lower income households. So when we talk about affordable housing and lower income, there's a couple of different income groups. There's low income, very low income, and extremely low income. And so those are all based off of the incomes in Dunsmuir, and I don't have the box in front of me what the income levels are for us. But the other thing too is the state law tries to promote fair and equal housing opportunities, including addressing disparaging in housing needs and access within the opportunity. And that's the AFFH piece, and making sure again that we're not spending all of our resources in an area that may not necessarily need them as much. And then we're trying to conserve and improve existing housing because it doesn't make sense to build more housing when you're not preserving your existing stock or making sure that that housing is safe. So again, when we have older housing stock, we get a higher percentage of houses with asbestos, with lead, or other type of environmental concern, mold, or anything like that. As Councilmember Heisler will know, a leaky roof on an old building can cause a lot of issues for the community. And so there are goals, policies, and programs to identify some of these what we call subpar housing issues. And then we want to maximize the housing opportunities throughout the community, as I said. And then the other piece is removing governmental and other constraints to housing maintenance, improvement, and development for all incomes. So again, people who are lower income can typically have or do typically have less resources available to them personally. And so they may not even have the capital or even the physical ability to maintain their homes like they should to keep them safe and properly ventilated for mold and things like that. Those are particular issues with our community. With Sacramento River, we have a higher humidity than maybe some of the higher altitude communities that are in the high desert. And so we want to make sure that people are not being constrained by zoning code regulations or other other pieces that may prevent them from doing those typical maintenance pieces. It's also going in and taking a look at who has a registered disability under the ADA, or those who may be on fixed income, or seniors, or the aging population, because those individuals, again, are less likely to be able to maintain their homes themselves. And so they may need a little bit more help with contractors or community programs. So you want me to keep going, Michelle?
I'm gonna try see if I can. I think I got water. I gave some throat.
I think we can pop forward to the. I'm not as up on what specifically is recommended for Dunsmuir. I can just go through the general stuff in state law.
Yeah. So let's see. Oh, I gotta go to the right slide. So yeah, this is a very high level summary of all some of the key changes in state law. And Juliana touched on some of these as I did myself, and that are reflected in chapter 2. So accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units, even with you got a compliant ADU ordinance, the state is also wanting to see localities do what they can within their resources to promote accessory dwelling units as a mean to provide more housing that can often be affordable by design, and to create more housing opportunities. And that's the mention of, Dunsmuir has a lot of detached single-family residences in town. So there could be some opportunities for homeowners, and that could be developed, just improving the available information, taking information ADU toolkits that other jurisdictions have developed, and tailoring that information to Dunsmuir, where there might be a little bit differences, but there's a lot of pre-approved plans out there in the community, in the state, and that sort of thing. Firmly furthering fair housing. This is a key one. We'll go over that a little bit more. Emergency and transitional housing. I think actually the city's got most of the work done with that. There's a change in the definition and the content in Appendix C covers this. Replacement housing for inventory sites. That's a policy that's written as a program into the housing element. No net loss. That's a, again, policy and practice as building permits come in to assure the city always is able to accommodate its RENA. Improved allowance for group homes. I think most of the heavy lifting with this one is already been accomplished. And housing transparency, and for the Housing Information Transparency Act was just making more information available to the community, to developers, especially as maybe if the impact fees are changed and those sort of things, just making that information available using the city's website. So some of the key approaches to addressing Dunsmuir housing needs, and most of this is all in Chapter 2. There is some an AFFH action plan at the end of Chapter 7, but really ultimately it comes down to increasing the access to housing and the supply of housing, encouraging that through zoning changes, that a lot of that's already been done, encouraging and supporting development of workforce housing. As Juliana mentioned, that's more of a income group. So the local workforce that that could be teachers and firefighters, police, those folks. Improve housing information, availability of housing information for residents, basically just increasing the level of knowledge in the community about housing, fair housing. And so there's a, folks might be more aware of what options and opportunities there could be in their community. Develop a strategy to reduce the vacancy rate, improve opportunity by supporting economic development. These two are in the action plan. The supporting economic development, that's really just continuing the city's collaboration and work with the Siskiyou Economic Development Council, other local nonprofits, and as the city as a Main Street organization, just supporting those efforts and keeping the collaboration and the channels of communication open, so that if if they have funding opportunities, if they need a letter of support, that the city's there for that. And so the city has awareness, I'm sure they already do, of those programs. So if you have contacts from the community, you could make referrals. And then update the zoning regulations to meet state requirements. And I think about 98% of that's already been accomplished. So one thing we would be interested in getting specific input on is the quantified objectives. These are part of Chapter 2. And I'm going to use my little pointer here. Laser pointer. So the city's RENA is two lower income units. One unit, and this would be new construction because there's a lot of rules associated with rehab. But one low income unit, and then the other unit is extremely low income. And so these are these quantified objectives, these are goals for the city to meet during the planning period, which goes from 2023 to 2031. So it's a lot of time. But if these values seem overly optimistic, we can adjust them downward, although we do definitely need to keep one unit here and one unit in these categories, because that's the arena. So that would have to stay. But these numbers are considerably lower than the previous quantified objectives. And we don't have any experience with HCD saying, you know, like holding jurisdictions to this, but this is to set a goal.
Yeah, and just to be clear also, if I could interject, this is Rico. These
Rico, could
numbers-
you speak into the mic a little bit more? You're a little quiet.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
You're very quiet,
What about now?
Still quiet.
very quiet.
Very odd. Okay, I'm clearly having a technical issue here. I'll get like my mouth to the microphone. But basically, I just want to acknowledge that we recognize that we need more than these units. The issue is traditionally HCD has plugged us with very high unit counts for our arena. At this point, we've hit the statutory minimum. In the past, if you didn't meet your arena, you could end up getting punitive regulatory language later that you know, the no net loss provisions and other stuff that can impact you. So these numbers play it safe, but it is recognized that the goal ultimately is more housing than what's in the housing element. But we just wanted to, again, play it safe. If the council wants to increase those numbers, not just decrease them, they can do so. You may do so as well.
Thanks for clarifying that. Yeah, because the community's housing need can often be higher than what the arena reflects. The arena is the kind of the floor, if you will. Okay, so the next steps in the process is the city, after following city council adoption of the housing element, is submittal of the document to the HCD. But before we can do that, we have to spend 10 working days to revise the element based on any planning commission or city council and community input that we have received or we received this evening. The housing element is then submitted to HCD. This would be in about 2 weeks. And then that's followed by, they have a 90-day review period to review the document. So we would get comments back about February. And they do stick to their deadlines. And then the housing element is revised to respond to HCD comments, February, March 2024, and then resubmitted back to HCD for their second 6 review period. This is their certification review of 60 days. And then, ultimately you get the golden ticket. The HCD certification letter is ultimately what you're going for. So that's kind of the process in a nutshell, if you will. So what we're asking the city council for this evening, to receive and consider any comments from the public and provide direction. And then at the close of that, find the draft 2023-2031 housing element to be exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to section 15061B3 of the CEQA guidelines, and adopt the resolution that's in your staff report, attachment A 2314, a resolution of the city council adopting Dunsmuir's housing element update. But maybe let me just go over before we go there on high, let's go there. So I'm just want to go over So you heard me mention earlier, develop the strategy to decrease the vacancy rate of housing units. So that the housing element does review, based on the available information, short-term rentals in the city based on registrations and previous work that the city has been doing, and also looks at, the US Census data on the vacancy. But ultimately, that data and where the information we had and direction, we did not, it seems there's still an uncertainty as to the vacancy, why units are being vacant. So rather than taking action in the housing element, establishing a program to take a definitive action regarding that, because it seems, there's probably some more facts that could be gathered to know what the best course of action is needed, if one is needed. It was the thought. So that's what the strategy is. So the first step, and this is subject to input, revision, whatnot. So survey and catalog the number and types of housing units being used in as short-term rentals, looking at, of course, registered, but also doing a point in time count of unregistered short-term rentals that, based on the information, are indicated to be in the city limits during peak tourist season for the city. Survey property owners of vacant housing units and units used for short-term rentals to understand why property is held vacant, length of vacancy, and then if there's any possible incentives to make housing available for long-term rent or purchase. Of course, this should be coupled with a grant program. So that is a consideration as well. Then the next step would be doing a public workshop, getting community input on strategies to decrease the vacancy rate, and then drafting a strategy that has options and recommendations for decreasing vacancy rate. It could be, combination of regulatory and financial incentives. And
Hey,
then
Michelle, really quick, which goal in chapter 2 is this?
this is actually in in appendix A at the end. It starts in section 7 of the document.
So there's no specific goal associated with that right-hand column, the adoption of a strategy to reduce the vacancy rate. There's no specific.
It's cross-referenced is the last program, the last 2 programs in chapter 2 cross-reference the AFFH action plan. So that's how that was accomplished.
Okay,
but what we have heard from HCD is they want the AFFH action plan, which this is a part of, to be there to be commitments by a jurisdiction, but at the same time they want jurisdictions to be able to if need be recalibrate their action plans to based on new information. Maybe it's just not, there's something more effective and more effective approach, that sort of thing. There seems to be, so they seem to be wanting these to be maybe have a little bit more flexibility in them in comparison to maybe the more traditional programs, perhaps. I think that's kind of what I've heard them say. But they do want commitments. So they don't want to see language of like explore or consider. They're wanting more active actions by jurisdictions. So
sorry for interrupting, Michelle.
No. So that I can but the rest of the programs are largely building on activities that the city is already doing, working with local organizations and agencies to, the housing authority, the, economic development folks, Great Northern to, for like housing rehab, to make housing vouchers available. So it's building on those, using the resources it has, such as its website, and to keep an active role in those types of things. So. But I'm happy to answer any questions, or I can review more if there's, yeah. So.
No, you're good, Michelle. So I know we had Councilmember Deutsch and then Councilmember Keisler had a question. And just to remind the council members, it is a public hearing. So if we can keep our questions to just clarifying questions, then we'll open the public hearing and then we'll come back to discussion where you can ask more questions if you want. So I'm going to start with Councilmember Deutsch and then Councilmember Keisler.
Thank you, Mayor. My big question is, there are all these programs that have been listed up there, I guess 7 of them or so, and are required by law. How does a city our size have the resources to be able to take those programs and turn them into actual units? I'm not sure how I see that happening. We don't have money that we can spend to create new units. We've done our zoning already, so I'm just trying to figure out what these programs are that require us to do something, and do we get resources to do that?
I mean, there's definitely grant funding available. There's other financial mechanisms. So one of the appendices is all about funding opportunities that are available to us. Previously, we had the SB2 allocations and LEAP allocations, which were per capita allocations, which are great. The REAP program, which kind of absorbed those programs, is now competitive, but you know, we do have the PLHA funding, which we've allocated to the county to help with homeless programming, which is part of some of the programs in here. But basically, we would be leaning on that funding opportunities appendix to identify other financing mechanisms. There are other fees and exactions that cities can institute, you know, within their own structure, which I would need to do more research on, or we'd have to have a more in-depth conversation on if we wanted to create, you know, permanent employment for someone who's housing specific. It's doable. It's not the easiest route for a lot of small cities to take, but it's doable, and we do have options available for funding, but a lot of it would be grant related.
When you imagine it, if we could get a grant, what would you imagine it would do to increase home? Would it be able to support somebody building something or fixing something, or that's?
So it would go directly to these programs. So like we would use these programs within our grant application to justify and say, for example, program HE 7.1.1, the city shall support public and private fair housing and legal aid organizations. And so if we did want to, you know, get legal aid organizations to do more prevention and correction of housing discrimination, say that comes up, we would then use that to apply. We would go, this is in our housing element. We have prioritized this as a program, and therefore it's our argument for getting that funding. The other thing too is we would leverage basically housing developers in general. So if we did get an affordable housing developer like the RCHDC in Wairika, which is working with the county, the county, I believe, went out for a RFQ for affordable housing developers to look for someone to do that. I can't remember exactly how they did that project. It's been a number of years that they started that, but there's a number of different opportunities. So for like the city of Wairika, they put out their housing element, prioritized increase in units. And so then they put out an RFQ for affordable housing developers. People put in for helping them out as interested. And then you basically work with them from there on their funding mechanisms. There's also potentially opportunities to contact nonprofits. Some of these, like there's a weatherization program in here, Great Northern Services used to provide the weatherization program. And so again, we would basically, as a small city and having limited resources, have to rely on grant funding, either prioritizing long-term funding, either through tax initiatives or property assessments, or we would have to go and partner with other agencies to be able to get those resources.
Appreciate that.
Councilmember Keisler.
How does this affect the area?
I think that's a question to Michelle and Rico. How would this affect Airbnbs?
So through the chair, there are no policies written into this document that would change the current short-term rental ordinance of the city. The strategy.
So again, clarifying questions, and then we'll get to discussion. So thank you, Michelle. Are there any other clarifying questions before we move into the housing or the public hearing?
You go to your table
Can you speak in the mic?
sorry, go to the table talking about the RENA numbers and these floors on them. I just wanted clarification on what constitutes a rehabilitation. Because rehabilitation, as I think most of us would recognize it, would have drastically higher numbers. I doubt, especially based on the extremely low, very low and low income, we'll get that sort of new construction. I think it's more likely we'll get 4 or 5 above moderate income new construction. But we could have, in one project alone, as many as 30 rehabilitated units. But then I was thinking, are these specifically units that have to be defined as having been dropped off from our housing stock already? So say we had an empty building that has 4 units and it's been empty for years. Is that currently in our housing stock or not? Is taking a vacant one and rehabbing it count as rehabilitation of a unit? When did something become so bad that it would then qualify for the RENA numbers for rehabilitation?
That's a great question. So the rehab, like I think when you're talking about a house that's so dilapidated and doesn't meet building code for habitable, and then someone invests to make it meet the habitable standards, that clearly would be in the rehab column. And since so when there's special provisions if you want your rehab numbers to meet your RENA, they're very specific. And we looked at those, and those were not a good option because of the threshold requirements. The percentage the math didn't make sense. The city would basically have to have a higher RENA number. So rehab, it could obviously include that, but I don't have a specific like what would be rehab. If it would be, go from that only would count the non-habitable to habitable, or some, I would think the city could consider, those things that are in between where, maybe it's not in very good condition, it's poor, the roof needs to be replaced and whatnot. So for this purpose, there's not that granular of a definition.
Michelle, these aren't CDBG funded rehabs?
They doesn't, well, I think when you're looking at the income of the group that's currently on the chart, those would probably be CDBG rehabs just because, it's extremely very low in terms of income qualifications. But in terms of the, whereas maybe moderate and above, that could be privately funded or through a loan, but we didn't make that distinction. But in terms of that granularity, but functionally it would be CDBG or similar funding program.
Sure, I guess that's my perspective. Is I've always looked at the rehabilitation goals and housing elements as being specifically for supported housing, assisted rehabilitated units. So like through whatever the funding program is. But
yeah,
and those, I've seen everything, talk about whether it's habitable or not. In the past, I've seen CDBG rehabs, and I believe they've gotten away from this. But everything that's gone except for a single wall, as they consider a rehab, even though it's really a new build.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I don't know if they're still doing those or not, but that's how I've typically interpreted this. You could certainly have, much, particularly for Dunsmuir and a lot of communities in Siskiyou County, you can have a much higher rehabilitation goal. Again, it's just sort of concerns about what HCD is going to come back with future, or not HCD, but the legislature is going to come back with future legislation and how that's going to tie your hands with what you've already committed to, after the fact.
Well, I guess that gets to another question. Is there a downside to projecting higher numbers that we would like to see and plan on seeing? Is there a downside to not meeting that next time around if we meet these floor numbers?
I think historically there hasn't, like if you didn't meet your quantified objective, historically that wasn't an issue. The quantified objectives, where there can be some, it's your RENA, the regional housing needs allocation, where things can get more, and you don't meet those numbers, there can be more complications potentially. And for the city, it's only 2, one low income and one extremely low income. But the quantified are not quite as penalizing it historically.
Hey, Wendy, we do have someone, I think Vanessa's trying to come back into the meeting. Oh, perfect. All right, are there any other clarifying questions before I open the public hearing?
Well, I still want an answer to when would a unit fall off of our housing stock count? Has that been accounted for?
That is a great question, and it gets, frankly, so what I'm trying to finish up right now is a staff report to the Planning Commission for its, as you know, we do the annual review of the short-term rentals, as we talked about back probably in May or June. When the commission last looked at it, based on current rates, we sort of punted everything for 6 months. So that review is next week. So I'm trying to wrap up that staff report right now. But looking at the numbers, it's been one of the great mysteries in trying to nail down this vacancy rate, the true vacancy rate. Michelle and I have talked about this. In fact, today we talked about it. Is sort of what the real numbers are for housing units in Dunsmuir, because we've got what appears to be some very bad numbers for multifamily. So the assumption is that, we still are showing these housing units, but, whether these, some of these are the Old Travelers Hotel and the Dunsmuir Hotel. But even then we're still shy, I think like 120 units that we can't find. So that is a great question about when this falls off, because the goal is every year we provide updated information to the Department of Finance to help them with their housing estimates to try to get that information corrected so we don't have any more bad data. That is the hope. So it'll be something that we'll be looking at shortly.
Okay, would that later have a reflection on our overall numbers if we correct it and we're 120 units less? Or is the numbers kind of function aside from that?
Well, I have heard stories that no matter what you tell state agencies, they refuse to change their data. I don't know what's going to happen, to be honest. I would just like to figure out, because it says something, we have something to the effect of like 360 multifamily units here, right? I think I've been able to count about 171. So what we ultimately have, I don't know yet, but it's going to require some effort to determine.
Okay, thank you, Rico.
Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify. I think if you report a unit as being demolished or maybe destroyed in those annual reports to the Department of Finance, that would reduce numbers. But I think other than other changes, like that it's been vacant and deteriorating, I don't think that gets captured in those numbers unless there was an action by the city or something for condemnation or something.
And that's the case with one of the buildings. So that is what we need to determine, because you're right. We are supposed to report any sort of any losses, but I don't know that the city has traditionally reported everything correctly.
Yes.
Thank you.
When did they start taking the inventory?
We've been required to submit that inventory for a very long time.
Okay.
Pre-interstate.
That's exactly what I'm thinking.
Probably not pre-interstate, but
Well, that would have
6 cycle would be 36 years ago, 48 years ago, right?
no, because some of the cycles were 5 years.
Every cycle is 5 years up until this
Cycle
cycle, and the
5.
last one was 8 years only by accident.
Yes.
So I
again-
have one more clarifying question, and this is more just a point for anyone who might be listening. Just confirming, a vacant unit is a building that is occupied for less than half the year, correct?
That's a great question. If you look at the Census Bureau's definition of vacancy, I think it's about 2 pages of different types of vacancies that they consider vacant. So I have to admit, I've not read the thing in its entirety.
All right,
Okay.
do we have any other clarifying questions before we move into the public hearing, knowing that we can again ask more questions and discussion? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing for the 2023 to 2031 sixth cycle housing element. Any takers? Mr. Dwight Bailey, our lone member of the public in person. Just make sure that's pushed up.
You gotta be smarter than the device. Dwight Bailey, 5906 Castle. On the planning commission, we went through this. It was kind of fun to go through, but I would like to just thank her for showing this presentation tonight. I learned a lot tonight. So that's all I'm doing is thanking her for that presentation.
All right, thank you. Are there any other public comments related to the housing element draft adoption? And again, you can go to reactions in the toolbar on Zoom, and we will also allow you to make a public comment. All right, seeing none, we will close the public hearing. I would like to start us off tonight, which I don't do very often. I am really disappointed in this document. As a planner, I think there was a huge opportunity to be a lot more creative with this and actually specifically address the city of Dunsmuir. I mean, I've already made notes in here. We don't have a program on secondary homeowners. We don't have a program or policy on short-term rentals. We don't have a policy on discouraging conversions. We don't have a program on correcting the data that we have. You know, again, if we know that data reporting is an issue, why is there not a program or policy or goal to correct that within our housing element? Because again, if it's in our housing element, we're able to apply for grants and make a greater argument with the state or federal or any other type of funder. And so that's why it's really important to get this right this time around. And this is every 8 years. So, and again, I understand you can update your housing element, you know, multiple times if you really feel like it. But again, it goes back to HCD. And we don't have a lot of resources. So if this is getting funded through LEAP, which I'm pretty sure it is, we're good until December 2024 for the funding. I don't see anything about minimum densities in zoning, which both myself and Councilmember Brian have talked a lot about with the zoning code update, looking for more missing middle types within our zoning code, allowing more diversity of housing types in our R1 zoning, which got put off. There's no discussion on inclusionary housing ordinances and different types there. I'd like to see a lot more robust discussion on universal design and ADA compliance. I understand we're a super hilly city, but still our housing can be more inclusive to people who are dealing with mobility issues, programs on homeless shelters and more homeless programming within here. I mean, we punt a lot of this stuff and I'm really disappointed because, you know, working with the American Planning Association and the California chapter, one of the big things that I try to promote a lot is rural communities not getting boilerplate documents. Because again, the more you have people contributing and the more the programs, policies, and goals are catered to the community, we're going to have better buy-in. We're going to have a better argument for grant funding. We're going to have a better argument with all of these different agencies. And I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. And I appreciate the work that Plan West does. I've worked with them, full transparency. They did Wairika's housing element and worked with me on that. And I really appreciated the learning opportunity. Michelle and Vanessa are excellent at what they do, but I want to see a so much more robust chapter 2. I mean, what's going on? Like, I want to see more programs, policies, and goals on cost burden, alleviating that cost burden piece. I want to see the missing middle housing types, which are those that are beyond the single family detached and high-rise apartment buildings. And we talked about this in the zoning code. So why is that input not making it into our housing element? I'm pretty upset about this and I apologize for that. I am not going to approve anything tonight. And the other thing too, that really grinds my gears is I am so disappointed that there was no real community outreach. Surveys and showing up for planning commission are not accessible for people who are lower income working multiple jobs. It's not accessible for people who don't have a ability or comfortable level speaking English. Like, how are we meeting these people where they're at? Why are we not doing public engagement? Look at what we're doing with our active transportation plan. We invested so much time and energy in public engagement, and we're getting a plan that's excellent. I mean, I'm really happy with it. And the members of the public are super happy with it. I mean, we have people talking about housing at our city council meetings, every other meeting, and we have one member of the public here tonight. You know, that's so disappointing. And the other thing too, final thing that I will say, and I will be done. Why did we not get a copy of this when this got released to the public? I mean, did any member of the city council get a copy of the draft housing element when it went out for public comment?
I did not.
I didn't.
I got it Monday.
I didn't even know this was gonna be on the agenda till I did pre-agenda last Thursday. Like, what's going on here, guys? Like, it's not hard to just send the council members a copy of the draft element when it goes out for public so that we have 30 days to review this. It's a robust document. I mean, I'm gonna be honest, like, it is very robust and it's not hard to just send an email to us and say, hey, it's publicly available. If you guys want to start reading it now and have notes. You know, and the other thing too is it's like, I want to know what the planning commissioner's comments were. I highlighted here on page 22 of our packets that it was presented to the planning commission in October. They discussed and had comments. What were their comments? What were the things they talked on? What were the topic areas? Were they disappointed as well? Did they want to see more community outreach? I mean, we have one of the few communities in Siskiyou and Shasta County that is like minuscule batshit crazy, pardon my language. But like, we have members of the community who are actual planners. We have people in the community who are very well intended and have great input on this. And when I brought up last Thursday that this was going to be on the agenda, most of the people who work and struggle to live here, because again, as you brought up, 46% of us are cost burden, you know, why did those people not know about tonight? Why are they not contributing to this element? And I'm frankly just very disappointed in the whole thing. And it's nothing personal to anyone, but we can do better. If we have grant funding to do this right now, I want it done well. And that's where I'll end tonight. I'm going to make a motion at the end of discussion to continue this to the regular meeting on November 16th to have more time to read through this. But honestly, we need additional time just to go back out to the public and actually ask them pointed questions. Like, I don't want a goal policy or program that says, oh, we'll conduct a workshop later. That's not good planning. And that's where I will end.
I would second that motion.
So there's a motion on the table to continue to the regular meeting to November 16th. And there's a second by Councilmember Keisler. Is there an earlier discussion on the motion at hand?
I speak in support of tabling it, primarily because I haven't had enough time to review this, and I've been excited about this coming to council for years now, and thought it was going to be the time to address a lot of the, you know, longer issues. And I would just say, based on the presentation and the comments and reading through it this week, it seems like it's and I'm not a planner, I'm not an expert on this, but it seems like it's a very well-written housing plan or element with the state in mind as an audience. I would like to see it be a well-written housing element for the city and our citizens. More focused, you know, and I understand the big reason why we have this funding, and part of the purpose is to, you know, get us all squared with the state so we're not in trouble, but it should also reflect what we'd like the next 8 years to look like as a community.
Absolutely.
Is there any other discussion on the motion at the end?
May I add something, interject something real quick, just for a point of clarification?
Go ahead.
Which is just so the council is aware, this is SB2 funded. It is not LEAP funded. We do not have until the end of next year. We have a special extension from HCD, which requires that all expenses be submitted no later than December 1st, which means all invoices submitted, all project closeout reports be submitted by December 1st. I just want to make that clear.
So what did we use our LEAP funding for?
LEAP funding is going for the general plan update that we're going to be working on. So right now, the housing element is, I don't know if you recall, but we had to amend the RFP for the housing element to basically be able to fund it. Because no one was interested in funding it at the prior level. And even then, when we did get proposals, it was hard to attract consultants. And not to say that Plan West has not done an excellent job. I think they've done a fine job, largely. But housing elements have gotten extremely expensive. My larger concern is making sure that the housing element is critically important to ensuring that the city continue to have access to grant funding, such as CDBG funding, PLHA funding, funding for SB2 planning grants, LEAP grants. Critically, and I agree that it plays an important role in the community. I also have seen, or the way that it can be used in a community. I've also seen the way they have been used in communities in Siskiyou County for many years. Fundamentally, my largest concern with the housing element is that it gets state certified so that cities continue to have access to the funding that it's predicated upon.
Thank you for your contribution. Councilmember Deutsch, you had a comment.
Yeah, I just want to put this in every single chance I can. To me, the one thing, I don't know if there's any program, any funding, and I keep looking for House of Glass would change so much in terms of affordable housing. If we found a way where somebody could come in and purchase that and turn it into some form of affordable housing. But I have no idea if there's anybody out there that's going to be raising it.
Yeah, there is redevelopment grant funding available for different type of housing pieces. It's going to be a little creative with that one, but in terms of this item at hand, the general plan is general, housing element is high level, but yeah, that's a very granular project that I think, again, could benefit from the programs in here.
Madam Mayor, was there anything for veteran? There wasn't, I saw nothing for veterans and helping them. That's.
So yeah, I think generally we're disappointed. And you know what? If you have an extension for SB2, in my opinion, I will call the vote here in a second. I don't care at this point. I'm serious. I don't. And I get it. I know what the mandates are. I work in planning. And at this point, why wasn't this done earlier? I contacted you guys in February of this year. And I'm not saying you guys plan West. Like, I shared that I would be able to help with outreach. I mean, that is a huge thing. And I am just so disappointed, reaching out in February. I have emails from March even, talking about housing and the housing, survey and trying to put that out. And we have been talking to constituents all year that have wanted a housing ad hoc committee, which I brought up in emails. And so we had so much time to do this. And I'm done. I'm not going to do poor work anymore. And I don't care. So, again, going back to it, yeah, Siskiyou County's been doing it for a while, but Siskiyou County is a hot mess for planning. And I'm not going to follow their lead anymore. So any other discussion, I'm going to call to question. May we have a roll call vote, please, Wendy?
Madam Mayor, may I interject one more time? I'm not going to disagree with you.
I have called the question. The motion on the table is to continue the item to the regular meeting of November 16th. Motion by Mayor Lucchese, second by Councilmember Keisler.
Councilmember Clarno.
Aye.
Councilmember Bryant.
Aye.
Councilmember Deutsch.
Aye.
Councilmember Keisler.
Aye.
Mayor Lucchese.
Aye, motion carries. Thank you for your time. We're going to move on to our next agenda item. Oh, I apologize. That was a new business later, but we'll move into our next item, which is old business, the wastewater treatment plant improvement project proposal for engineering and design. And I'll hand it over to City Manager Reed.
All right, Mayor and Council, before you today is an amendment to basically, we originally submitted a planning grant in 2019. And this amendment is to adjust the scope of the project for the construction component. And so we're currently in the construction component of the wastewater plant. The big primary differences in the memo, there's a whole list of items that are new. But what got us to this point was there's been a substantial amount of advancement in technology, and also just a different view on how we can operate our plant. And so and furthermore, the state has lifted, they were previously confined to a $5 million cap on what we could construct. Well, they've recently lifted that cap. So that allows us to actually address all the issues that we thought needed to be addressed rather than just piecemeal. And so here we are bringing this forward as an amendment to what's already been designed or proposed to be designed for construction. And with it's like $96,300 to have Face Engineering move forward with that aspect. And this would be reimbursed grant.
Thank you. Is there any clarifying questions? Nope. All right, we'll move into public comment. Is there any public comment on the wastewater treatment plant improvement project, engineering, design and construction services? Again, if you are participating on Zoom, you may go to the reactions tab in the toolbar and raise your hand. All right, seeing none, we'll move into discussion. Is there any discussion or a motion at hand? Councilmember Brian.
Earlier today, I had the opportunity to speak with our Public Works Director. And I asked him, I said, I read this report, what was in the project before this? Because this seems to reflect the entire sewer plant. But he explained to me some background. I don't know if Dennis, if you want to come up and kind of tell them what you were telling me as far as the shifting or Justin, if you'd like to.
15 sands.
Yeah, to give us more context for what's going on.
So adjusting. As you've seen, we keep going for more money here. And
We're
we
recording.
keep going for money there to get the plant, keep the plant at the current status. We're at that point now where technology has brought us to a place where the equipment is coming down in prices, being more competitive. So there's actually a huge upgrade possibility of redoing the plant to today's technology, getting us to the next 20-25 years, instead of piecemealing this together every 4 to 5 years with X amount of funds. There's nothing wrong with the plant. It's just moving us forward into the new technology and keeping forward, kind of like we did with the water department. And then bite off a big chunk of it and move forward.
How is this going to affect the sewer fund? Is this going to require, are we still planning a 218 on the sewer and that will all get wrapped into this?
Yes, correct. We are doing a 218. And so this is aspects of the grant will cover that. And so then the 218 is because we're at the end of our 5-year period.
Right.
And we also need to address just operational issues. So a lot of the changes in here are to address if we have a really burdensome process, it takes a lot of personnel hours to maintain the plant on a daily basis. It typically takes about 1.5 persons, so 12 hours a day just to maintain the plant. And if you get behind, then it takes 2 people. And so that means they're not in the field, right? And so now newer technology allows us to move away from the higher operational cost of right now we're dealing with chemical issues because we can't get sodium bisulfite. We can't get a lot of the chemicals to produce the chlorine for that stuff without in the ridiculous amount of cost, right? So for us to get, whether it's 1 bottle of chlorine gas or 5 bottles, we could potentially have to pay $5,000 just in transportation cost. Because the only place on the entire West Coast we can get it is out of Los Angeles. And so that truck only comes up once a week. And there's only 2 of us remaining up in this area that are still using it. And so a lot of our operational costs that drive the 218 have gone up and keep going up. And we can't control those without these improvements. And so that's why we're adjusting. The amendment is so large, it looks like a lot, and Councilmember Brian is right. It's basically a new plant, but some components of our plant are original. So when the plant was built in 72, right? In 1972. So we're 50 years into that, 51 years into that plant. By the time we get to construction, it'll be 2 to 3 years from now. And by the time it's completed, it'll probably be 4 years from now. And so these components, the reliability of what we're looking to do is shifted substantially, and the technology has shifted so much that our plant, to piecemeal it back together, all we're going to do is just continue to extend our prolonged burden of these operational costs. And so the goal is let's start fresh. Let's get back to somewhere new and be able to reduce that cost, reduce our burden of staffing requirements and those kind of things, to where maybe it's operated, it only takes 6 personnel hours a day to manage the plant or less, right? Because then it's updated, it's computer managed, It just send us alert, we go down and we adjust something or auto adjust, or you can adjust it from your computer if you're sitting at home in the middle of the night, if we're in the middle of a rainstorm. And so that's the kind of technology that's available today that was not available in 2019
So
in the same capacity.
we've been painting the pig and now we're fixing to get a whole new pig.
Right, yeah, the pig has been painted, it has lead-based paint. And it's
Literally.
it's literally time to sandblast it.
Good.
Time to sandblast it and check out what's really in the nitty gritty. And so that's where we're at.
All right.
And so,
So just to follow up a little bit, I'm just gonna, this is gonna, we can take the money we still have in that enterprise. And we can do this, and then later have a Prop 218 and use the money from that to continue. I guess you're saying that we wouldn't actually start construction for a while, so that gives us time to do the Prop 218. That's, I'm just the sequence.
Yeah.
Maybe I can clarify. I think this is just expanding the scope of a grant. So all
Okay.
that's
right.
gonna be
Mhm.
paid for by the
Okay.
state, if the state agrees.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And from the 218 side, it's more everything we do today is the operational costs keep growing.
I understand.
And are out of our control.
Yeah.
And this is our way to help control those. So future 218s, we may be able to stabilize that a lot better. And, maybe a 1% or 2%, which everybody be ecstatic about, right?
Okay.
Because right now we're not there. We're having 10 to 12% increases in some
Sure.
areas of what we have to do.
Thank you.
I'm
Just-
convinced and I understand. I'm going to make a
Just a
motion.
second, if I may. It's noted here that there is a fiscal impact and we do need to do a budget adjustment. Are we doing the budget adjustment tonight as part of the motion, or is that coming back to us at a later date?
We can make it a part of the motion.
You're welcome. What, do you know what the
Thank you.
amount is?
See, I knew Blake should have been here tonight and he's like, I'm gonna go
I'm just excited I got it.
What's the number?
96,300.
And that's out of the sewer fund, correct?
Yes.
Yep.
And that's to do their engineering for that.
Correct.
Correct.
And it's reimbursable. It just would have to be reflected in the budget.
When will we know whether the state accepts this expansion, or is that almost a given, provided we're willing to,
Yeah, I mean,
it's negotiated?
yeah, there was a cut to funding, so it may be delayed a little bit, but there will be, I mean,
They raised the cap.
they're pushing us because our application is on the top of their pile now. And so they're pushing us to get it submitted, and so they can make a decision.
Perfect.
And they're aware of it. We've talked to, and they will be here to tour the plant tomorrow, so.
I return to you, sir.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the city of Dunsmuir's wastewater treatment plant in the amount of $96,300 for the improvement project proposal for engineering, design and construction services.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion by Councilmember Keisler, second by Councilmember Deutsch. We'll go for a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Clarno,
Aye.
Councilmember Bryan,
Aye.
Councilmember Deutsch,
Aye.
Councilmember Keisler,
Aye.
Mayor Lucchese.
Aye, motion carries. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, can I request a 5-minute recess?
Yes, we will recess for 5 minutes and we will come back at about 8:50. Or
8:50,
7:50. Sorry, my angle on that.
Take a nap.
7:50. If you could please just turn off. All right, thank you. I will call us back to order at approximately 7:50 PM on November 2nd, 2023. Wow, I feel like the speaker got better in like a weird way. We've already, well, yeah, we'll move into new business. We've already covered item 11A within the public hearing. So we'll move on to item 11B, which is a presentation of the draft snow removal policy plan. And just for the edification of the council members, in pre-agenda, we discussed introducing the item and continuing it automatically to the next meeting to give us all a chance to absorb it, look at it, ask questions today. But there's no requested action today to give us an ample amount of time to review it.
Cool.
So for time tonight, just for your reference, we're not making a decision. So I will hand it over to City Manager Reeve.
All right, Mayor and Council. So to start off, after the meeting, we have our new snow plows and stuff. Our new equipment is sitting outside. All that can go over there. We'll start them up, operate them, show you what we got for our new tools in our toolbox. And that's to kind of kick off our winter snow policy discussion. So Councilmember Clarno has kindly taken the lead as our kind of ad hoc committee and moving this forward with the community members. And now we're bringing it forward to the council with what our recommendations are and for some discussion and guidance. And so overall, we went through a number of kind of example policies out there and looked at them and like, okay, what fits Dunsmuir? What doesn't work? How can we make other things work? And so this policy is to help guide the residents, but also to give us as staff, the approval that, hey, everybody in the community is on board with this. Let's move forward with this as our plan on how we're going to operate for snow removal processes. So ultimately, there's three areas. We met 3 times. And the attached policy, so starting on page 57 is the snow operations policy. And so it's about, I don't know what it is, 20 pages or whatever. I haven't updated the appendices yet in the actual index. I apologize. I thought that was the one thing I caught or didn't catch. And so in looking at it, it's like, how are we going to communicate? Who's going to make those communications? Who's going to take charge? And what is the equipment we have available? How are we going to use that equipment? Where is it going to? What's the routes? And then kind of our timing and that kind of stuff. We also discussed parking and how are we going to address parking? We felt that our current policy doesn't work in its current capacity where everybody has to be off the street. We realize that the majority of, I guess I would say, South Dunsmuir doesn't have parking off street, and that puts a huge burden on residents in looking at older residents or people who our expectation is for them to get off the street after 3 inches of snow and move to a parking lot. Well, we just recently lost access to one of our biggest parking areas in downtown. And so quite frankly, there's just not enough parking no matter where we put it, right? And so we're looking to, we are making one recommendation that we want to move to allow certain streets to have odd even parking. And this is a traditional thing that it's been something that's been implemented in the Midwest and is very successful in helping manage the snow removal process. Like wider streets like Dunsmuir Avenue, excluding the downtown area, which is something that I want to discuss. But then like Shasta Avenue and Castle, all of those are wider. But then when you look at streets like Daly or Olive or Eleanor or some of these other ones that are narrower. Siskiyou, yes. And a lot of these ones where you can't park because of width, the goal is to have 2 lanes minimum. Well, if we don't meet 2 lanes when it's dry and like it is today, then how are we going to meet that with a car parked on the street? It's a little in piles of snow and those kind of things. And so we need to go through the map. That's part of what we haven't finished yet, and then create an ordinance based on your guys' direction. And so that's one of the recommendations.
Can I just interject with one quick second?
Sure.
So we'll end up with basically, I think we ended up with 3 or 4 street classifications, which is streets that will still allow parking on both sides, even in snow removal, which I think we only had 1 or 2.
Bruce, I think was the only one.
Because for some reason it's way wider than any other street in this town. streets that allow odd even parking during snow removal conditions, and then streets that are no parking. So basically, each street would have a classification on what it allows, and it will just be class 1 or class A, class 2 or class B, you know, however it ends up being officially. What the terminology is. Right, I just wanted to jump in there with that.
Okay, thank you. We also discussed, one of the other issues that, we had, come across was snow storage. So, you know, we had a very large amount of snow in a short amount of time last winter. And that kind of made us realize that, you know, we can't expect residents to put all that snow in order for them to get out. We have to try and offer other areas for that snow to be removed to if it needs to be, not just residents, but also commercial, commercial properties as well. And so we didn't really have a mechanism for that before. And so it was just kind of oh, well, we saw somebody on the, like, calling us and like, hey, can we move snow? Yeah, you can move it here. But we want to be able to designate that in advance. So when we're in the thick of moving snow at the city, we're not having to manage contractors moving snow as well, right? We have enough of our own things we need to deal with, and we want to make sure that we can handle our operations and not have to worry about theirs. And so what that snow storage component also brought up, the need to implement a permit process, or a license, I guess I would call it, for snow removal contractors. And what this would do, it would give them like a two-year license. Basically, they would come in, they'd have to, we'd meet sometime probably in September or October, ideally. This year is going to be a little later because we got to adopt that ordinance to move forward with that. But it would basically have them come in, they would meet with the public works director and city manager and go through, hey, these are the properties I have under my contract. These are, I have issues with moving snow at this property. Where can I move it to if I run out of capacity, and those kind of things, and just talk through, general areas and where that snow can be moved off site if needed. I went into this process with the idea of my number one goal is to have all the commercial properties have access first, right? Because if the businesses can't open, we don't get tax dollars. And that's how we operate. So businesses first. Number two is our residents and address parking challenges and snow storage. And so I believe we captured that fairly well. One of the things we want a recommendation from the council is trying to define downtown. So one of the recommendations that came from the committee was a downtown improvement district, and the downtown improvement district would help supplement not only other improvements for downtown, but also snow removal. And so that would be the way that would work would be we'd establish a district, and then whatever that fee would be towards the taxes. We're trying to be as fair and equitable as possible. And unfortunately, we have a lot of absentee landlords and vacant properties in downtown. And,
Send them a bill.
Exactly. It goes on their tax bill, right?
Exactly.
And so that's the goal, right? So it's like I felt it is very important. I've done this in two other Midwest cities, actually all three cities that I've managed before. We always moved all the snow in downtown, off the sidewalks, curb to curb, door to door. We moved it off and out, because if our businesses aren't open and people can't access our businesses, nobody's spending $1 in downtown or sales tax, right? And so if I'm not getting the sales tax dollar and we're not getting people to feel comfortable coming out. Last year I remember climbing over giant piles of ice over here because it wasn't removed in front of one of the vacant buildings, right? And then that prevents people from parking in downtown, prevents people from going to the building, to the businesses that want to be open. And I feel like we have an obligation to support those businesses.
Mind if I jump in again here for a second?
Absolutely.
Because the current ordinance that exists now and is still part of this plan, this I'm not sure when this ordinance went into effect, probably 30, 40, 50 years ago. Dictates that snow removal off of the sidewalk is the obligation of the property owner. So our issue, one thing we are wanting to solve with this downtown improvement district is, as we mentioned, there's lots of businesses down there where the land, they're not going to clear that snow. So we can either find them to start doing it, or we can create this downtown improvement district and we just remove that snow. And then we ensure that, at least in downtown, everything's done uniformly, everything's done evenly, and everything's done in a timely manner. And then you don't get, pizza factories shoveled out their sidewalk, but the business next door hasn't. So it doesn't matter if you park 2 streets down, you still have to walk in the road.
So are you saying that this improvement district would be funded by the businesses down there?
Right.
Property
Yes.
owners.
Yep, the property owners, it would be a tax assessment to every single parcel.
So if you're doing a benefit assessment district or a Mello-Roos district, it does require a vote of those property owners to vote into that district. And so there's depending on which model you go with, a Mello-Roos has a lower threshold to be able to do the district, but it requires a higher number of votes in favor of the property owners impacted, where a benefit assessment district requires a little bit more upfront planning and management, financial costs within that, in a what we call a double nexus test. And then once that report is done, then you can go to a vote of the property owners involved, and it's a 50% plus 1 vote. So it is a voting process.
The other's 2/3.
The other is 2/3, but you have a lower threshold for going into that district vote, so you kind of have to like balance those two out, but not to get ahead of ourselves on that. But they can pay for snow removal, they can pay for public art, historic preservation. There's a lot of different options you have for those.
Okay.
So this could be partnered with one of those.
So, and while we're on the note of sidewalks, I want to address another important part of this because it came up multiple times. Anyone I talked to has brought this up. Basically, it came up during the committee, and then it also came up several times at the active transportation plan meeting, and that's the 800-foot bridge. So basically, the city will be responsible for removing snow from the freeway tunnel, and that basically the Dollar General crosswalk, all the way up to the end of the 800-foot bridge. And then Chevron and Yaks are responsible for removing snow from their sidewalk. However, they both contract with a independent contractor, or with a snow removal contractor who was at these meetings. And I'll get into that. Yep, Pierce, and I'll get into that in just a second. And then basically from the Siskiyou overpass up to Cave Springs' property is basically our responsibility again through Parks and Rec buildings. So basically it would allow a full pass through, which is also snow is removed by Pierce there, so basically it would allow full connection from North Dunsmuir all the way down to where Dunsmuir Avenue widens out, would have the snow removed off the side.
So does our new equipment allow us to do the sidewalks on the 800-foot bridge?
That's the goal.
Okay.
And so, and we can talk about equipment here in a minute, but some additional equipment that we're looking at will also help with that. So I can,
Obviously, that's the key safety item, people walking on the icy road and cars coming by.
right. And it's, I mean, we saw it all through the winter last year where they're walking on the street because there's nowhere else to walk, right? We didn't have the right tools in our toolbox other than go out there individually, scoop the whole thing off bucket by bucket. We don't have, there wasn't a real easy way for us to do it. I mean, it took almost a full day for us to clear the snow off of the 800-foot bridge.
This will be a huge move forward then, of course, as a city. Right?
Yes, from a standpoint of being able to get the job done, we can get it done quicker.
The biggest gap there, though, which is still a little bit of a question since it is mostly residences and property, is from the Dollar General crosswalk down to Dunsmuir Supermarket. Because there's no real city-owned property in that stretch. Then the other thing, I just want to segue into this as well, since it ties in. For the commercial operators permit, so say where Steve Pierce is doing Chevron, Yaks, those areas, he can just go to them and be like, Now we can go, hey, it's your responsibility to move the snow off the sidewalks. Since I'm a licensed operator, I have permission from the city to do that. I'm just gonna take care of this. We'll include it in your price. So basically, any of these licensed operators will be told that you have, the sidewalks are the responsibility of the business owners, and they can just get that taken care of. At the same time, they're clearing the parking lots and all that kind of other stuff. So it ties in really well together.
I have a question,
Yes.
but I'm gonna wait till after the meeting to ask it to you.
Okay. Do you have a whole more stuff? So I do have one more thing I want to touch on.
Oh, yeah, I mean, a couple of things for discussion was the downtown improvement district. How far should we? How do we outline that? Where's the parameters? I mean, we have some general idea, like what we'd like to see. I consider it basically from the burger barn to the supermarket and post office. I think that's but then it also includes some residences in between. And so that but they're on the main corridor, and that's a well trafficked walking path, I guess I would say. And then that would also include Sacramento Avenue from basically right here at the bottom up to basically the Amtrak station.
If we're exploring the idea of a business improvement district, how would that tie in with what Peter has been asking about all along, which is to have a specified historic district board that, that whole thing he brings up all the time? Would that be something to bring that together into one?
It could be, yes.
Yeah,
We could do two conjoined districts or overlaid districts on top of each other, or it could encompass. both.
The historic district itself, I believe, is already defined and has its map.
But he wants to, he's been saying all along that the three members that are on the planning commission really don't address the specific needs of the historic district, and wanted to imagine taking one away.
In my experience, historic district kind of means two things, because it's both our downtown district and it happens to be the area with important historic buildings. So he's very interested in, his time on council, this in the historic preservation side. But I think most of the time he's really speaking to downtown revitalization.
Okay.
And so I think our downtown can be larger than our historic district, because no one's going to argue that at least I wouldn't, that the grocery store would be historic or need sort of special preservation, but it's probably part of, the northern edge of the downtown district.
So I was just going to tie into that exact point. One reason we didn't just put in the historic district is because the historic district does not include the brewery, the grocery store, or the post office. Those are all outside the historic district. And I feel like both the grocery store and the post office are going to be two places that get the most walking traffic even in the winter. So I personally wanted to make sure that those two businesses were included.
6 houses technically.
There's three on one,
When I was
three
a
on one,
kid,
three on
going
each
to my
side.
grandma's post office, it looked just like that. That is like old.
Yeah. So
Was there anything else you want to add to the report?
there was one more thing I wanted to add, because it's not addressed inside of this document. And that is the outreach to educate the public regarding these new policies. And there were a few ideas I wanted just to mention to everyone. And then when we talk about this again, if anyone has any further ideas, we'd like to hear that input. And feel free to pick up any of the ones I don't mention. So we discussed a couple different options. Obviously, first is a mailer in the water bill, something on Facebook, email, sending out
with the children from schools.
flyers from schools. One thing we talked about was making up just a piece of paper that basically our code enforcement officer will walk around, basically canvass the whole town with this that says, if this were a snow removal condition, here's how you can learn about our new policy. Here's what the new warnings look like, and has just some basic information. So basically it's just everyone will go, well, what's this on my car? Oh, interesting. if I see this in,
If he give
In a
it to them,
couple
they're gonna
months.
throw it away.
Hmm?
If he give it to them, they're
No,
gonna throw it away.
it'll be on the windshield.
Find another
the-
way to present it, just don't use him to do it.
Well-
It'd be my,
Most people won't know he put
I'm
it
being
there.
real.
And it could be any city employee, but it'll just be
Anything
on the
one
window.
would work,
Huh?
just not that one.
Yeah.
They don't wanna listen to anything you gotta see. When they see him, they think they're in trouble or it's gonna
Yep.
cost them money.
But
And
he's,
it ain't up
yeah.
for debate.
So I'm gonna please continue with the outreach.
And then, so that'll include both. Another one is, having two different notices that go on people's vehicles. One is you have 48 hours and then your car will be towed, maybe towed after that point. And then there's hey, your car is going to get towed within the next at any point in the next 24 hours. So one's yellow or orange, the other one's red. So the red sticker is, if you see this red sticker, you need to move your car right now. If you see the yellow or orange sticker, you have some time. Basically a warning and get this out of here right now.
There's an organization that I think would be really key to keep
Mhm.
up with, and that's the Resource Center, because
Mhm.
they have an understanding of all the people out there that are probably challenged, and on top of that, they have
Mhm.
commodities that they're giving out. They're giving out today, I think. But the point is, you could have this going home with them on the commodities, and that would be people that don't know if they have a smartphone or a web or anything else like that.
So, and then the last one I'm thinking of, and then if I missed any, feel free to jump in with them, is a QR code on the sticker. And this QR code, you take a picture of it with your phone and it takes you to our city snow removal page website. And it has information, it has a link to the policy, it has information on where can I park? Where can I do this? Basically all the information that's pertinent. And it also will have a list of all of the licensed snow removal contractors. So that way, if someone is like, hey, I just need help shoveling, someone to come through with my driveway, they can call one of the operators. And
That's
get
a good
that. So
idea.
basically, website that not only has
And tow truck.
basically just any information that someone might need that relates to snow removal, including helpful stuff that they can get through the city, will be on this
If
page.
we had some kind of a placard or something with the QR code on it, that we could put in all our Airbnbs and require that to be up there, so when the people come in, they'd be able to automatically say snow and.
So one thing, and this was brought up in specifically in relation to Airbnbs, is Airbnbs in the city are required to be registered and they're required to have off-street parking. At least, I think there might be one or two that were grandfathered in. I'm not sure, but as far as I know, according to the policy, you'd know more.
All that are on residentially zoned parcels.
Okay.
So commercial districts different.
So therefore, since they're required to have off-street parking, they should be contracting with one of these people to
Well, I'm just talking
get the
about,
plowing.
I'm talking about somebody who doesn't understand they have to move their car.
Yeah,
Right.
That's what I'm
sure.
talking
Oh,
about.
yeah.
Yeah,
great,
so
great point,
so
yeah.
part of that is also we'll have like one of those little trifold little flyers. And so I know this is a lot and I feel like we're behind the curve and it's gonna be an education process that's not gonna be perfect. But we have to at least start. And so the trifold component I think we need to make it have a requirement within as part of our inspection checklist as for the Airbnbs. And I want to add that as a part of that
That's
component as
great.
well.
That's really
Just
cool.
because I've been in Airbnbs and sometimes you get great information in your little book and other times it's kind of like, yeah, that wasn't really helpful, you know.
Councilman Burke, did you have a comment? Sorry. Any other comments? Otherwise, I will open it up for public comment.
The last thing I'll just say on this is overall, I feel like this actually makes. Overall, I'd say this either keeps things the same or actually makes things a little easier on all of our citizens. The fact that the majority of people in town will be able to do that odd even parking and won't have to go find a parking lot somewhere and walk a long ways will actually make this easier on the majority of our citizens.
I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and they have the odd and even parking for all overnight parking in the city, not even snow events. So this is a very common concept in a lot of cities, especially older cities, because again, where I grew up in Milwaukee is a kind of a more historic area, very narrow streets. And so you just have to, by nature, switch sides every other day and you get used to it, you get in the rhythm of it. It does take a little bit of time to get used to, but I think it's a good compromise for, you know, the problems that we face. Are there any other comments before I open public comment? All right, seeing none, we'll move into public comment. If you'd like to make a comment on the presentation of the draft snow removal policy, please feel free. And Wendy, just to let you know, Allison is trying to be admitted. I'll let you at least admit her and I'll give her a chance. Right, really quick, Allison, I know you joined us later. We are in the public comment portion of the snow removal policy presentation and draft plan. I know that you also served on the committee with Councilmember Clarno. Is there anything you'd like to make a comment on before we close out this item and continue it to next meeting? All right. Oh,
No, sorry. No, I'm good.
okay, cool. You were logging on right when we got to it, so I didn't want you to miss anything. All right, seeing no public comment, I will close that. Are there any other parting words, knowing that this will come back to us at the next meeting? And you can also, in the meantime, also discuss this or give other additional recommendations to the city manager or Councilmember Clarno, who was part of that committee offline.
I'll just say I'd like to take very seriously I wasn't expecting this to come up from the snow removal policy, but the downtown district, we've been kind of talking about for years. If now is the time to put that together, potentially, I think Cosmont might also be on the verge of recommending something in that regard, that we keep that on the future agenda items at the top of the list.
There's also in the active transportation plan, they're making some recommendations for downtown improvements as well.
Okay.
So there's a motion to how about we continue, or we could table it for.
Table it.
There's a motion to table the item to the next meeting.
I'll second.
So there's a motion by Councilmember Deutsch, second by Councilmember Keisler. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll move now into future agenda items. I would like to, at the next meeting, since it was brought up that we are using city manager, since it was brought up by our contract planner, Rico Tinsman, that we are using a specially extended SB2 grant for the housing element, could I please request an item on the next agenda to discuss funding around the housing element? Again, if we do have LEAP funding available still, which is good until December 2024, we may want to consider potentially requesting those items be amended to allow more input, but I will leave that up for council discussion at a later meeting. But I would like the item on about financing related to that.
Question.
Go ahead.
So with that in mind, are you saying that your concerns about what's not in there, we can worry about that later and just move on? Or is there some movement between now and the end of November to add some of those things into there?
You
I
know,
hope so.
continuing the item, I that is not a lot of from my professional experience, it is not a lot of time to add those items in, go back and do CEQA compliance and do those items, but we did continue the item, so we do need to consider it. One of the actions we could choose to do at the next meeting is to not approve the draft and to go back and refer it to Planning Commission with notes, as we've stated. And so I would at least like to have a budgetary item to discuss what our options are if we choose to do that. Just to have a holistic conversation and what our options are. Just so that we can make sure we have everything in line with that. So knowing that we will have the snow removal policy coming back, housing element is coming back, housing funding is coming back. Are there any other future agenda items that we do not have on this list?
Big push. A lot of people asking about the marijuana ordinance.
Yes, we did request.
You did say you were gonna bring it back.
Yes, we are gonna bring it back. We did request a work of scope from our contract planner for us to bring back here to consider the scope and budget, because we do not have it in the budget yet. My understanding is our contract planner has not responded to us yet with a budget or scope. But there may be an item on the next agenda that may address that.
Thank you. That's what I'll tell them.
I don't know if it'll be ready for the next, but I'm still looking forward to getting some update on the downtown hotspots.
Okay.
Is there any
Yeah,
progress on that?
Yeah, I meant to follow up on that today and I that did not fully make, I was tied up
playing
with
with toys.
wastewater.
Just hoping.
You were playing with toys.
No, it was,
Uh,
it's right in the front of my head because I knew it was coming, so. what's
So we can do an
happening? I can
update
give
over
you-
email maybe, because it is 20 after.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
could we maybe reach out, some of the staff reach out to the town historian, because he's supposed to do it once a month. And I know sometimes he can't, but we could just,
He's had a little health issues lately.
I'm sorry to
Yeah.
hear that. But yeah, if he is available, we'd love to have him.
All right, again, you can email us, you can come talk to us if you need any other future agenda items for consideration. But I'll move us into adjournment. All those in favor of adjourning, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
I need a drink.